Most people enter the fight without a plan, then wonder why they lose. Victory doesn't start on the battlefield. It starts in the mind. Long before swords are drawn or words are spoken, the outcome is decided by preparation, positioning, and perspective. Sun Tzu didn't believe in chance, he believed in strategy. In this message, I'll show you how to prepare your mind like a general. You'll learn how to think before you move, strike before you're seen, and win before the battle even begins. Subscribe to our channel if you're ready to master your mind, and tell us, where are you watching from? In the depths of your consciousness lies a battlefield far more treacherous than any you will ever face in the physical world. This is where wars are truly won and lost. This is where empires rise and fall. This is where your destiny takes shape. Long before you ever lift a finger to act, listen closely, for what I am about to share with you has toppled kingdoms and raised armies from dust to glory. The mind of a warrior is not born. It is forged through understanding deeper than the ocean, through discipline harder than steel. Every great victory you will ever achieve has already been written in the chapters of your thoughts. But here's what most don't understand. The battle for success is fought in silence, in the quiet moments when no one is watching. You see, most people live in reaction. They respond to life as it happens, believing that preparation begins when challenge appears. This is the thinking of amateurs, of those destined to serve rather than lead, of those meant to follow rather than conquer. But you're different. You're here because something inside you knows there's more. You recognize that true power isn't in the strike. It's in the stance taken before the strike. It's in the breath before the shout. It's in the stillness before the storm. Let me ask you this. Have you ever wondered why some people seem to move through life with an almost supernatural sense of certainty? While others scramble, they stride. While others react, they direct. While others hope, they know. This is not chance. This is not luck. This is the power of mental dominance. The ancient principles I taught my generals still echo through time because they speak to an eternal truth. The mind is the commander of the body. When your mind is aligned, your actions become inevitable. When your thoughts are clear, your path becomes obvious. When your strategy is sound, your victory becomes certain. Think of your mind as a kingdom. Every thought is a soldier. Every belief is a general. Every doubt is an assassin waiting in the shadows. Your task is not just to rule this kingdom, it's to transform it into an unstoppable force, a force that shapes reality before reality even knows it's being shaped. Here's what separates the true strategist from the mere tactician. The strategist understands that external chaos is merely a reflection of internal disorder. When you master your inner realm, the outer world bends to your will, not through force, but through the natural flow of cause and effect. But let me warn you, this path is not for the casual seeker. This knowledge demands more than just understanding. It demands integration, implementation, incarnation. You must become strategy itself. Consider the bamboo. For years it grows beneath the soil, invisible to the world. Those who don't understand might think nothing is happening. But deep beneath the surface, an elaborate root system is forming. Then, when the moment is right, it shoots upward with such force that it can grow several feet in a single day. This is how you must cultivate your mind. The untrained mind is, like a mercenary army, unreliable, unpredictable, serving whatever emotion pays the highest price in the moment. But the mind of a true warrior, it's an elite force, disciplined, coordinated, moving with singular purpose toward inevitable victory. Your thoughts are not just thoughts. They're battle plans being drawn in the war room of your consciousness. Your beliefs are not just beliefs. They're the supply lines that will sustain you when the fighting gets fierce. Your focus is not just focus. It's the scout that moves ahead of your main force, ensuring you never walk into an ambush. Remember this, every great achievement in human history began as a thought. Every empire, every invention, every revolution, all were born first in the battlefield of the mind. Those who master this inner territory become the architects of reality, not its servants. So I ask you now, what territory are you prepared to claim? What battles are you ready to win? What reality are you willing to architect? Because make no mistake, while you sit here absorbing these words, others are already in motion. The only question is, will you be the one shaping events, or will you be the one shaped by them? The choice, as always, begins in your mind. But it doesn't end there. It never ends there. This is just the beginning of your transformation from a player in the game to the one who writes its rules. Let others rush to action without thought. Let them mistake motion for progress. Let them confuse activity with achievement. You know better now. You understand that true victory is born in the mind, nurtured in silence, and revealed only when success is inevitable. This is the way of the warrior. This is the path of the strategist. This is your path now, if you dare to claim it. There is a knowledge more precious than jade, more powerful than armies. It is the twin wisdom of self-awareness and situational clarity. Let me share with you what most warriors never grasp. The battlefield is merely a mirror of your inner landscape. Here's what most people don't understand. They rush to study their opponents while remaining strangers to themselves. They analyze the terrain but miss the territory within. This is why they fail. This is why they fall. This is why victory eludes them, even when success seems certain. Every morning before my generals would survey their troops, I would ask them one question: what enemy did you face in the mirror today? The weak ones would laugh, the strong ones would understand. Because the first and most dangerous opponent you will ever face is yourself. Think deeply now. What are your true capabilities? Not what you wish them to be, not what others believe them to be, but what they actually are. This inventory of self is your first and most crucial battle map. Your strengths are your weapons. Your weaknesses are the gaps in your armor. Your habits are your daily training. Your fears are the spies in your camp. Know them all. Master them all. Because if you don't, someone else will use them against you. But here's where it gets interesting, and where most people miss the deeper truth. Self-knowledge without situational awareness is like having a sword, but being blind. You have the tool but lack the timing. You have the power but miss the opportunity. Let me ask you this. Have you ever watched a master craftsman read the grain of wood before making the first cut? Have you seen a skilled farmer read the sky before deciding when to plant? This is what I mean by reading the terrain of your life. The terrain I speak of isn't just physical. It's psychological, social, economic, political. Every environment has its own geography of power, its own weather patterns of opportunity, its own seasons of advantage and disadvantage. In combat, there is high ground and low ground. In business, there are emerging markets and dying ones. In relationships, there are moments of strength and moments of vulnerability. The principle remains the same. Position yourself where your strengths align with the terrain's opportunities. But remember, this terrain is never neutral. It either works for you or against you. The same hill that shields you can trap you. The same river that blocks your enemy can cut off your retreat. This is why understanding must go deeper than mere observation. You must learn to read the hidden currents, the subtle shifts, the invisible patterns that others miss. When I trained my generals, I would take them to the same battlefield at different times of day, in different seasons, under different conditions. Why? Because mastery isn't about memorizing one scenario. It's about understanding the principles that govern all scenarios. Consider this. Every situation has its own rhythm, its own pulse, its own natural flow. When you understand this rhythm, you can move with it instead of against it. When you grasp this pulse, you can predict movements before they happen. When you feel this flow, you can position yourself where opportunity must pass. Here's what separates the master from the amateur. The amateur sees only what is. The master sees what was, what is, and what will be. They understand that every moment is connected, that every situation contains the seeds of its future state. Your task is not just to observe, but to interpret, not just to see, but to understand. Not just to know, but to anticipate. This is how you transform knowledge into power, observation into advantage, understanding into victory. But let me warn you, this kind of awareness comes with a price. Once you begin to see these patterns, you can never unsee them. Once you understand these principles, you can never go back to ignorance. This is both a burden and a blessing. The blessing is that you will never again be truly surprised. The burden is that you will see the consequences of actions long before others do and often be unable to convince them of what you see. This is why self-knowledge must come first. It gives you the stability to stand firm when others doubt, the confidence to act when others hesitate, the wisdom to wait when others rush forward. Remember, the terrain of your mind must be mapped before you can effectively map any external territory. Your internal landscape must be conquered before you can conquer any external objective. This is the foundation upon which all other victories are built. So, I challenge you now, begin this double mapping. Start this twin journey of discovery, because once you truly know yourself and can read the field of battle, whether that battle is in business, in life, or in actual combat, you become unstoppable. Not because you're stronger or faster or smarter than everyone else, but because you understand what others don't even know they should be looking for. In the shadows lies a power that most will never grasp. While others chase the spotlight, the true master moves unseen, understanding that visibility is often the greatest vulnerability. Let me share with you a truth that has toppled empires. The loudest voice in the room is rarely the most powerful. Here's what most people don't understand. They mistake attention for influence. They confuse recognition with power. They believe that to be strong, they must be seen to be strong. This is the thinking of amateurs, and it leads to their downfall. Consider the wind. You cannot see it, yet it shapes mountains. Consider water. In its gentle flow it appears weak, yet it carves canyons. Consider thought. Invisible to the eye, yet it moves nations. This is the power I want you to understand, the power of invisible influence. The warrior who announces his strength has already shown his weakness. The leader who boasts of his plans has already begun to fail. The strategist who reveals his wisdom has already lost his advantage. Why? Because predictability is the mother of defeat. Let me ask you this. Have you ever wondered why the most powerful forces in your life often moved without fanfare? The mentor who changed your path with a quiet word. The opportunity that came when you weren't looking. The insight that arrived in silence. This is not coincidence. This is the way of true power. But mastering invisibility requires you to defeat your greatest enemy, your own ego, your need to be acknowledged, your hunger for validation, your desire to show others your power. These are the chains that bind you to mediocrity. The greatest victory is the one that appears to happen by itself. The most effective influence is the one that seems like the other person's idea. The most powerful position is the one others don't realize you hold. Think of it this way. When a master of strategy achieves victory, the defeated opponent often believes they made a mistake. They never realize they were guided there step by step by an invisible hand. This is the apex of strategic thinking, not just to win, but to win so naturally that victory appears inevitable. Here's where most fail in applying this wisdom. They try to appear mysterious instead of actually being strategic. They confuse secrecy with strategy. They mistake silence for strength. But true invisibility is not about hiding. It's about understanding the psychology of perception. When you appear weak, you must be strong. When you appear strong, you must be invincible. When you appear foolish, you must be most wise. When you appear wise, you must transcend wisdom itself. This is how you create the conditions for victory without fighting. But remember this crucial truth: the goal is not to remain forever hidden. The goal is to be invisible until the moment of maximum impact. Like lightning from a clear sky, your move should come when least expected, and with such decisive force that response becomes impossible. Consider how water wears away stone, not through force, but through persistent, invisible action. Each drop seems powerless, yet over time, the hardest rock gives way. This is how you should shape circumstances, not through dramatic gestures, but through consistent, invisible pressure. The modern world tempts you to announce every move, to broadcast every achievement, to seek validation for every step. Resist this. Understand that every time you reveal your position, you give others the power to counter it. Every time you showcase your strength, you allow others to prepare for it. Instead, learn to find satisfaction in anonymous achievement. Learn to take pleasure in watching others celebrate victories you quietly orchestrated. Learn to find fulfillment in knowing rather than showing. This is not about deception. It's about strategic positioning. It's not about hiding. It's about choosing the perfect moment to emerge. It's not about weakness. It's about understanding. That true power doesn't need to advertise itself. The master strategist knows that real power is like gravity, invisible but undeniable. It doesn't need to prove itself. It doesn't need to justify itself. It simply acts, and the world responds. So I challenge you now. Can you release your need for recognition? Can you operate in silence? Can you build your strength in the shadows? Can you plant seeds of victory that others won't see until they've already bloomed? Remember, the moment you feel the need to prove yourself is the moment you've lost your strategic advantage. The truly powerful don't convince, they attract. They don't push, they pull. They don't argue, they position. Let others chase the spotlight. Let them announce their intentions. Let them broadcast their strength. You know better now. You understand that true power moves in silence, strikes from shadows, and shapes events long before others realize the game has even begun. The supreme art of war is not winning battles. It's creating situations where victory is inevitable. Listen closely, for what I'm about to share with you is the difference between those who chase success and those who orchestrate it. Here's what most people don't understand. They wait for the perfect moment, not realizing that such moments are created, not discovered. They see opportunity as something that appears, rather than something that's engineered. This is why they remain reactive, while others become architects of circumstance. Think of a master farmer. Does he simply throw seeds on untilled soil and hope for the best? No. He prepares the ground. He studies the seasons. He creates the conditions where growth becomes inevitable. This is how you must approach every challenge in your life. The amateur asks, "How do I win?" The master asks, "How? Do I make winning inevitable?" This shift in thinking changes everything. It moves you from the realm of hope to the realm of strategy, from the domain of chance to the domain of certainty. Let me ask you this. Have you ever watched a grandmaster in chess? Long before the decisive move, they are arranging pieces, creating pressure points, establishing control of key squares. By the time their opponent realizes they're in danger, escape is already impossible. This is the power of strategic preparation. But here's where most fail. They focus on the final move rather than the setup. They obsess over the strike without understanding that the strike is merely the visible part of victory. The real work happens in the invisible realm of preparation. Consider pressure. Like the ocean depths, it builds silently, invisibly, but inexorably. When you understand how to create pressure, you understand how to make others move according to your design. Not through force, but through the careful orchestration of circumstances. You must learn to see every situation as a web of forces waiting to be aligned. Every person has their pressures. Every system has its stress points. Every structure has its fault lines. Your task is to understand these forces and arrange them to serve your purpose. This is not manipulation, it's architecture. You're not forcing anything to happen. You're creating conditions where what you want becomes the natural outcome. Like water flowing downhill, success should become the path of least resistance. But remember this crucial principle. The conditions you create must appear natural. The pressure you apply must feel inevitable. The choices you present must seem like they arose from circumstances rather than design. This is how you lead others to the conclusion you desire while letting them believe they arrived there independently. Here's where strategic genius reveals itself, in the ability to make victory appear effortless. When you've created the right conditions, success looks like luck to observers. They don't see the careful preparation, the precise positioning, the patient building of pressure. They only see the final moment when everything falls into place. Think of it this way. Every great achievement has a visible and an invisible component. The visible part is what others celebrate, the victory, the breakthrough, the success. The invisible part is what you're orchestrating now, the positioning, the preparation, the pressure building. But let me warn you, this approach requires patience. It demands the ability to think in sequences rather than single moves. It needs you to understand that time itself is a condition you can shape and use. Most people rush. They try to force outcomes. They push when they should prepare. They strike when they should be setting the stage. This is why their victories, if they come at all, are always harder than necessary. The master strategist knows that the easiest battle to win is the one that's won before it begins. Not through superior strength, but through superior positioning. Not through greater resources, but through better preparation. Not through force, but through the careful orchestration of circumstances. So, I challenge you, in your next endeavor, don't start by asking how to win. Start by asking how to make winning inevitable. What conditions need to be in place? What pressures need to build? What positions need to be established? Remember, the greatest victory is not the one snatched from the jaws of defeat. It's the one that was guaranteed before the first move was made. This is how you transcend the realm of tactics and enter the domain of strategy. Let others celebrate their hard-fought victories. Let them boast about overcoming overwhelming odds. You know better now. You understand that the true art lies not in fighting battles, but in creating situations where battles become unnecessary, because success has already been assured through the careful creation of winning conditions. The highest form of strategy is not to break your opponent's resistance, but to let them break themselves. What I'm about to share with you is perhaps the most subtle yet powerful principle of strategic warfare, the art of letting others defeat themselves. Here's what most people don't understand. They exhaust themselves trying to force outcomes, never realizing that the greatest victories come when you allow your opponent's own nature to work against them. This is the difference between the amateur who wrestles with problems and the master who lets problems wrestle with themselves. Consider a river meeting a stone. The river doesn't fight the stone, it flows around it, letting time and persistence do what force cannot. Eventually, the stone yields not to the river's strength, but to its own rigid resistance to change. This is the principle you must master. The essence of this strategy lies in a profound truth. Every strength contains the seeds of its own destruction. Pride becomes arrogance. Confidence becomes recklessness. Caution becomes paralysis. Your task is not to attack these qualities, but to create situations where they naturally transform from assets into liabilities. Let me ask you this. Have you ever watched an angry person destroy their own objectives? Have you seen how greed can blind someone to obvious dangers? How impatience can unravel the most carefully laid plans? These are not accidents. They are opportunities for the strategic mind. But here's where true mastery reveals itself. You must learn to recognize not just weaknesses, but potential weaknesses. Not just what is, but what could be under pressure. Every virtue can become a vice when pushed to its extreme. Every quality that serves in moderation can destroy in excess. Think of it this way. Your opponent's greatest strength is often where they're most vulnerable. Why? Because it's what they trust most, what they rely on most, and therefore what they question least. This blind spot is your opportunity. The master strategist understands that people defeat themselves in predictable ways. The proud become too proud to adapt. The cautious become too cautious to act. The aggressive become too aggressive to withdraw. Your task is to create circumstances where these natural tendencies become fatal flaws. But remember this crucial point. You must appear to do nothing while everything is being done. Like a skilled matador, you don't fight the bull's charge. You simply ensure it charges where you want it to go. The bull defeats itself through its own momentum. Here's where most fail in applying this wisdom. They try to force their opponent's destruction rather than letting it develop naturally. They push when they should wait, act when they should observe, strike when they should simply position themselves correctly. Consider how a small comment can plant a seed of doubt that grows into paralyzing uncertainty. How a subtle challenge can provoke an overreaction that exhausts resources. How a strategic retreat can lure an opponent into overextending themselves. These are the tools of sophisticated strategy, but this approach requires something rare in today's world: patience. You must learn to wait, to watch, to understand that time itself is a weapon, and rushing is often the surest path to defeat. Let your opponent's eagerness become their enemy. Let their strengths become their weaknesses. Let their momentum become their undoing. The modern world tempts us to act quickly, to force outcomes, to make things happen. Resist this. Understand that the most elegant victories come not from what you do, but from what you allow to happen. Not from the force you apply, but from the forces you align. Think of it as psychological Aikido. In Aikido, you don't oppose your opponent's force, you redirect it. You let their own energy become the source of their defeat. This is how you should approach every challenge, every conflict, every competition. But here's the deeper truth. This principle works not just in conflict, but in all aspects of life. In business, let competitors overextend themselves. In negotiations, let the other party's assumptions work against them. In personal growth, let your own resistance reveal what you need to learn. So I challenge you now. Can you develop the patience to let situations ripen? Can you resist the urge to force outcomes? Can you learn to recognize when someone is positioning themselves for their own defeat? Remember, the greatest victory is not the one you seize, but the one your opponent hands you through their own actions. The supreme strategist wins without seeming to compete, succeeds without appearing to try, and lets others defeat themselves while appearing to do nothing. Let others exhaust themselves fighting battles. Let them wear themselves out forcing outcomes. Let them break themselves against their own rigid strategies. You know better now. You understand that true power lies not in what you do, but in what you let happen, not in how you fight, but in how you position yourself so that fighting becomes unnecessary. The supreme general wins not by fighting every battle, but by choosing which battles to avoid. What I'm about to share with you now goes against everything your ego wants you to believe. Sometimes the greatest victory lies in walking away. Here's what most people don't understand. They think courage means fighting every challenge that presents itself. They confuse avoidance with weakness, retreat with failure. This misconception has destroyed more careers, more businesses, and more armies than any enemy ever could. Consider the oak and the bamboo in a storm. The oak stands rigid, refusing to bend, proud of its strength, until it breaks. The bamboo bends, yields, seems to submit, and survives. This is not cowardice. This is strategic wisdom. Let me ask you this. Have you ever watched a master boxer step away from a punch? Have you noticed how the greatest entrepreneurs abandon failing ventures before they drain all resources? Have you seen how skilled negotiators sometimes walk away from deals that others desperately chase? This is the wisdom I want you to understand. The amateur asks, "How can I win this battle?" The master asks, "Should this battle be fought at all?" This distinction makes all the difference between strategic thinking and mere tactical reaction. But here's where true wisdom reveals itself. Knowing which battles to avoid requires more courage than fighting them. It demands that you overcome your ego, transcend your pride, and focus solely on your ultimate objectives. Think of it this way. Every conflict you engage in consumes resources: time, energy, money, reputation. These resources are finite. When you waste them on unwinnable battles, you deny yourself the ability to fight the ones that matter. The master strategist understands that some situations are like quicksand. The more you struggle, the deeper you sink. Your task is to recognize these situations before you're caught in them, not after. Consider these scenarios: a market that's fundamentally changing, a relationship that's fundamentally broken, a position that's fundamentally compromised. In these cases, adaptation or withdrawal isn't just an option, it's an imperative. But remember this crucial truth: walking away should never be a reaction born of fear. It must be a decision born of clarity. The difference is everything. One is retreat in panic. The other is strategic repositioning. Here's where most fail in applying this wisdom. They wait too long to recognize unwinnable situations. They commit too deeply before assessing the true nature of the challenge. They let pride keep them in fights that wisdom would have them avoid. The supreme strategist knows that position is more important than engagement. Sometimes the wisest move is to reposition yourself entirely, to change the game, rather than try to win an unwinnable one. Think about water again. When it meets an immovable obstacle, it doesn't try to break through. It finds another path. It doesn't lose power by doing this. It preserves it for when it can be effectively used. But this requires something rare in today's world: the ability to resist social pressure. Others will call you weak. They'll question your courage. They'll challenge your resolve. This is where your strategic wisdom must be stronger than your need for approval. Consider how many resources you've wasted in the past fighting battles that couldn't be won. Think of the opportunities you missed because you were engaged in conflicts that should have been avoided. This is not about the past. It's about ensuring you don't repeat these patterns. The modern world often celebrates those who never give up, who fight against all odds. But this romantic notion of persistence can be strategically fatal. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is recognize that a battle cannot be won and preserve your resources for better opportunities. So I challenge you now. Can you develop the wisdom to recognize unwinnable situations? Can you cultivate the courage to walk away from battles that don't serve your ultimate objectives? Can you build the strength to resist the ego's demand for unnecessary engagement? Remember, every battle you avoid is resources preserved for battles that matter. Every conflict you sidestep is energy saved for conflicts worth winning. Every fight you don't take is capacity retained for fights that advance your true objectives. The greatest victory often lies not in the battles you win, but in the battles you are wise enough to avoid. Not in the fights you finish, but in the fights you never start. Not in proving your strength, but in preserving it for when it truly matters. Let others exhaust themselves in unwinnable battles. Let them waste their resources trying to force impossible outcomes. Let them break themselves against immovable obstacles. You know better now. You understand that true strength lies not in fighting every battle, but in choosing the right ones, not in never retreating, but in knowing when to redirect your energy toward more promising opportunities. In the realm of strategy, transparency is a weapon, but rarely in the way most think. What I'm about to share with you is the art of strategic opacity, the power of keeping your intentions hidden while the world reveals itself to you. Here's what most people don't understand. They mistake openness for honesty, clarity for strength. In doing so, they hand their opponents the very map to their defeat. The moment your intentions become clear, you've given others the power to prevent them. Consider the moon's reflection on water. Try to grasp it, and you disturb the very surface that creates it. This is how you must make your intentions appear to others: visible, yet untouchable; clear, yet impossible to grasp. The master strategist understands that every revealed intention becomes a target. Every declared goal becomes a point of resistance. Every announced plan becomes a blueprint for opposition. This is why the wise keep their purposes hidden, not in shadows, but in plain sight. Let me ask you this. Have you ever noticed how the most effective leaders often seem to be pursuing one objective while quietly achieving another? How the most successful negotiations often conclude with both parties believing they've achieved their aims? This is not coincidence, it's strategic ambiguity at work. But here's where true mastery reveals itself. The art is not in being mysterious, but in being unreadable. Not in being secretive, but in being so natural that your actions could have multiple interpretations. Like water, which can be falling as rain, flowing as a river, or rising as mist, your movements should seem natural, while their true purpose remains unclear. Think of it this way. Every action you take sends signals. Every word you speak creates echoes. Every move you make leaves traces. Your task is not to eliminate these signals, but to ensure they can be read in multiple ways. The supreme strategist knows that confusion is often better than concealment. When your opponents think they understand your intentions, but each sees a different purpose, you have achieved the perfect state of strategic ambiguity. Consider how a skilled politician can give a speech that different audiences interpret differently, each hearing what they want to hear. This is not deception. It's the art of maintaining strategic flexibility through calculated ambiguity. But remember this crucial principle. Your actions must always appear consistent with multiple possible intentions. If you're advancing, it should be unclear whether you're attacking or merely positioning. If you're retreating, it should be ambiguous whether you're withdrawing or setting a trap. Here's where most fail in applying this wisdom. They try to hide everything, making themselves obviously secretive. Or they reveal too much, thinking partial honesty is the same as strategic ambiguity. Both approaches defeat the purpose. The art lies in making your actions appear natural while keeping your true purposes fluid and ungraspable. Like a river that could flow in any direction, your potential should seem unlimited while your actual direction remains uncertain. Think about how nature conceals its most important processes. A seed doesn't announce its intention to become a tree. A caterpillar doesn't declare its transformation into a butterfly. The most profound changes often happen beneath a surface of apparent normalcy. But this approach requires something rare in today's world of constant sharing and social media. Updates the discipline of strategic silence. Not the silence of inaction, but the silence of purpose. Not the silence of fear, but the silence of control. The modern world pressures you to declare your intentions, to announce your plans, to share your objectives. Resist this. Understand that every declared intention becomes a limitation. Every announced plan becomes a constraint. Every shared objective becomes a target. So I challenge you now. Can you learn to move with purpose while keeping your purposes unclear? Can you act with intention while maintaining strategic ambiguity? Can you achieve your objectives while letting others believe you're pursuing something else entirely? Remember, the greatest strategies are often invisible, not because they're hidden, but because they're misunderstood. The most effective moves are often unseen, not because they're concealed, but because their true purpose is unclear. Let others broadcast their intentions. Let them announce their plans. Let them reveal their strategies. You know better now. You understand that true power lies not in what you reveal, but in what you keep fluid and ungraspable. Not in what others think you're doing, but in the space between all possible interpretations of your actions. The supreme art of strategic opacity is not to become invisible, but to become like water, transparent yet impossible to grasp, visible yet impossible to hold, present yet impossible to predict. This is how you maintain the ultimate freedom of action while others remain bound by their own declared intentions. The difference between victory and defeat often lies not in strength, but in selection. What I'm about to reveal to you is perhaps the most practical principle of strategic warfare, the art of identifying and exploiting points of weakness that others have overlooked. Here's what most people don't understand. They attack where the enemy is strongest, believing that overcoming the greatest resistance brings the greatest victory. This is the thinking of amateurs. The master knows that true victory comes from striking where resistance doesn't exist. Consider water again. It doesn't try to penetrate rock at its densest point. It finds the cracks, the spaces between, the points of least resistance. Yet, given time, it can split mountains. This is how you must learn to apply your force, not against strength, but through weakness. Let me ask you this. Have you ever noticed how some of the most dramatic changes in history came not through frontal assaults on power, but through unexpected angles that nobody was watching? How innovations often succeed not by competing with established forces, but by serving overlooked markets. This is not coincidence, it's strategic wisdom. The supreme strategist understands that every system, every organization, every competitor has its blind spots. These are not always weaknesses in the traditional sense. They're often simply areas of neglect, points of overconfidence, or zones of assumed security. Think of it this way. Preparation creates strength, but it also creates predictability. When people fortify their defenses, they typically do so based on where they expect attacks to come from. Your advantage lies in approaching from directions they haven't considered. But here's where true mastery reveals itself. The best points of attack are often hiding in plain sight. They're not weaknesses that nobody can see. They're opportunities that everyone sees, but nobody recognizes as significant. Like the space between chess pieces that suddenly becomes a critical pathway, these opportunities are invisible until they're exploited. The master strategist knows that preparation has limits. No one can be strong everywhere. No defense can be perfect. No attention can cover everything. Your task is not to find obvious weaknesses, but to recognize where preparation ends and assumption begins. Consider how many successful businesses started not by competing directly with industry leaders, but by serving segments of the market that were considered too small or unprofitable to bother with. They attacked where the giants were unprepared, not because they couldn't prepare, but because they didn't think they needed to. But remember this crucial principle: the point of least. Resistance today may not be the same tomorrow. You must be fluid in your assessment, ready to shift your focus as your opponent's awareness changes. The moment they recognize their vulnerability is the moment you should be preparing your next angle of approach. Here's where most fail in applying this wisdom. They look for obvious weaknesses rather than strategic opportunities. They seek points of failure rather than points of transformation. They try to break through walls when they could simply walk around them. Think about how a skilled martial artist doesn't attack strength directly, but uses the opponent's energy against them. How a good negotiator doesn't challenge positions head-on, but finds unexpected areas of agreement. How a successful innovator doesn't try to beat established products at their own game, but creates new categories entirely. The modern world often celebrates head-on competition, direct confrontation, and overwhelming force. Resist this thinking. Understand that the most effective action often comes not from meeting strength with strength, but from recognizing and exploiting areas of unpreparedness. So I challenge you now. Can you learn to see not just what is there, but what isn't. Can you train your eye to spot not just strengths and weaknesses, but areas of opportunity that others have overlooked? Can you develop the patience to wait for the right point of attack rather than rushing to engage where everyone expects? Consider these questions in your own endeavors. Where are your competitors overconfident? Where are they paying the least attention? Where have they decided they don't need to prepare? These are your points of opportunity. But this approach requires something rare in today's world: the ability to resist the obvious, the discipline to avoid engaging where everyone else is engaging, the wisdom to recognize that the easiest path to victory often lies where no one else is looking. Remember, the greatest opportunities often lie not in confronting strength, but in exploiting unpreparedness. Not in fighting battles where everyone expects them, but in engaging where no one thought to defend. Not in breaking through resistance, but in flowing through gaps that others didn't even know existed. Let others exhaust themselves attacking. Fortified positions? Let them wear themselves out fighting where everyone expects them to fight. Let them break themselves against prepared defenses. You know better now. You understand that true strategy lies not in overwhelming strength, but in identifying and exploiting points of unpreparedness. The supreme art of strategic attack is not about being stronger than your opponent's strongest point. It's about being present at your opponent's weakest point. It's about recognizing that the most vulnerable point is often not where defenses are weakest, but where attention is least focused. The greatest strength lies not in being immovable, but in being impossible to predict. What I'm about to share with you is the principle that has determined the fate of empires, the power of strategic adaptability. Here's what most people don't understand. They mistake rigidity for strength, consistency for power. They build their strategies like fortresses, solid and unchanging, only to find themselves trapped within their own inflexible thinking when circumstances shift. Consider water once more. It has no constant shape, yet it can take any form. It has no fixed path, yet it always finds its way. It has no permanent state, yet it endures forever. This is not just poetry. It's the deepest principle of strategic thinking. Let me ask you this. Have you ever noticed how the most enduring companies aren't the ones that stuck to their original plans, but the ones that evolved with changing times? How the most successful leaders aren't those with unchanging strategies, but those who adapt their approach to meet the moment. This is the wisdom of strategic fluidity. The master strategist understands that every advantage is temporary, every position is transient, every strategy has its season. Your task is not to perfect a single approach, but to develop the ability to shift between approaches as circumstances demand. Think of it this way. Rigidity is death in strategy. The moment you become predictable, you become vulnerable. The instant you commit too deeply to one approach, you lose the ability to respond to change. Like water, your strength must lie in your ability to transform. But here's where true mastery reveals itself. Strategic adaptability is not about changing randomly or reacting to every shift in the wind. It's about maintaining your core purpose while changing your methods. Like water that remains water, whether it flows as a river, falls as rain, or rises as steam, the supreme strategist knows that adaptation is not weakness. It's the highest form of strength. It's not indecision. It's the ultimate expression of strategic wisdom. It's not confusion. It's the clearest path to lasting victory. Consider how nature itself teaches this lesson. The species that survive aren't the strongest or the most intelligent, but the ones most responsive to change. The same principle applies in strategy. Victory goes not to the strongest, but to the most adaptable. But remember this crucial truth. Adaptation must come from understanding, not reaction. You must sense shifts before they become obvious, anticipate changes before they become urgent, and transform before transformation becomes necessary. Here's where most fail in applying this wisdom. They wait too long to adapt. They hold on to winning strategies until they become losing ones. They mistake their temporary advantages for permanent strengths. They become victims of their own success. Think about how many great empires fell, not because they were weak, but because they were strong in ways that no longer mattered. How many businesses failed not because they were incompetent, but because they were excellent at things that had ceased to be important. The modern world demands this wisdom more than ever. Change is not just constant, it's accelerating. Markets shift overnight. Technologies transform industries in months. Social changes reshape societies in years. In this environment, strategic rigidity is a guarantee of eventual defeat. So I challenge you now. Can you learn to hold your strategies lightly? Can you develop the wisdom to know when to persist and when to transform? Can you build the courage to abandon winning approaches when they begin to lose their effectiveness? Consider your current position. What assumptions are you holding that might need to change? What strengths are you relying on that might become weaknesses? What fixed positions might need to become fluid? But this approach requires something rare in today's world: the humility to admit that today's solution might not work tomorrow. The wisdom to know that what brought you success might not keep you successful. The courage to change while you're still winning, not just when you're forced to. Remember, the greatest power lies not in being unchangeable, but in being unpredictably changeable. Not in standing firm against all opposition, but in flowing around resistance to find new paths to victory. Not in maintaining a single form, but in being able to adapt your form to any situation. Let others pride themselves on their consistency. Let them boast about their unchanging methods. Let them celebrate their rigid principles. You know better now. You understand that true power lies not in resisting change, but in mastering it. Not in being immovable, but in being impossible to predict. Not in standing against the flow of events, but in becoming the flow itself. The supreme art of strategic adaptation is not just about surviving change, it's about thriving on it. It's about making transformation your advantage, uncertainty your ally, and fluidity your strength. The most devastating battles are won not through force of arms, but through the fragmentation of focus. What I'm about to reveal to you is the subtle art of psychological warfare, how to divide attention until unity becomes impossible. Here's what most people don't understand. They attempt to overcome resistance directly, never realizing that the greatest victories come from dissolving resistance from within. They try to break walls when they could simply dissolve the foundation. Consider a mighty army, unified. It stands invincible. But divide its focus, scatter its forces, fragment its purpose, and it defeats itself. This principle applies not just to armies, but to any opposition you face. Let me ask you this. Have you ever noticed how the most effective leaders don't try to overcome resistance head-on, but rather create situations where resistance dissolves on its own? How the greatest negotiators don't attack positions directly, but rather introduce elements that make rigid positions impossible to maintain. The master strategist understands that every unified force contains the seeds of its own division. Every focused mind harbors multiple concerns. Every single purpose masks numerous competing priorities. Your task is not to fight these elements, but to bring them to the surface. Think of it this way. Unity is powerful but fragile. It requires constant maintenance, continuous attention, ongoing reinforcement. Introduce enough competing demands, and even the strongest unity begins to crack. But here's where true mastery reveals itself. The art lies not in creating division, but in revealing divisions that already exist. Like a skilled geologist who doesn't break the rock, but rather identifies where it will naturally split, the supreme strategist knows that every mind is already divided between duty and desire, between short-term and long-term, between what is and what could be. Your task is to understand these natural fault lines and work with them rather than against them. Consider how water can split a mighty boulder not through force, but by flowing into existing cracks and gradually widening them. This is how you must approach the task of strategic division, not through brutal force, but through subtle expansion of natural separations. But remember this crucial principle: the goal is not destruction, but disruption, not to shatter, but to separate. Not to break, but to blur the lines that hold opposition together. Here's where most fail in applying this wisdom. They try to create artificial divisions rather than working with natural ones. They attempt to force separations rather than allowing them to develop organically. They rush the process when patience would serve better. Think about how many great organizations have fallen not through external attack, but through internal division. How many powerful alliances have dissolved not through defeat, but through the gradual separation of interests? How many strong positions have weakened not through direct assault, but through the subtle introduction of competing priorities? The modern world offers unprecedented opportunities for this approach. Information flows constantly, attention splits naturally, priorities compete endlessly. In this environment, maintaining unity becomes increasingly difficult. So, I challenge you now. Can you learn to see the natural divisions in any unified opposition? Can you develop the patience to let these divisions emerge rather than forcing them? Can you resist the urge to attack directly when indirect pressure would be more effective? Consider these questions in your strategic thinking. Where are the natural points of tension in your opponent's position? What competing priorities might they be struggling to balance? What assumptions hold their unity together, and how might those assumptions be questioned? But this approach requires something rare in today's world: the ability to think in layers rather than lines, to see relationships rather than just positions, to understand dynamics rather than just statics. Remember, the greatest victories often come not from attacking strength, but from dissolving the foundations that support it. Not from opposing unity, but from making unity impossible to maintain. Not from fighting resistance, but from making resistance dissolve from within. Let others exhaust themselves in direct confrontation. Let them wear themselves out, attacking unified positions. Let them break themselves against solid walls. You know better now. You understand that true strategy lies not in meeting force with force, but in dissolving the bonds that make force possible. The supreme art of division is not about creating conflicts. It's about revealing the conflicts that already exist. It's about understanding that every unified front contains multiple competing interests. Every solid position harbors numerous potential fractures. Every single purpose masks a multitude of divergent goals. Think like water seeping into rock. It doesn't fight the stone structure, it works with it. It doesn't try to break the rock, it allows the rock to break itself along its natural lines of weakness. This is how you must approach the art of strategic division. But this wisdom comes with responsibility. The power to divide is the power to dissolve resistance, but it must be used with purpose and precision. Like a surgeon's knife, it should be employed not to destroy, but to create the conditions for something better to emerge. In the end, remember this: the most effective division often appears as choice rather than conflict, as opportunity rather than opposition, as alternative rather than attack. This is how you master the art of dividing and conquering, not through force, but through the subtle art of making unity optional rather than necessary. The greatest battlefield lies not in the physical realm, but in the domain of emotion. What I'm about to share with you is perhaps the most powerful principle of strategic warfare: how to maintain your calm while letting emotion become your opponent's greatest vulnerability. Here's what most people don't understand. They believe that mastering strategy means suppressing all emotion, or worse, they think it means using anger as fuel. Both paths lead to defeat. The true master knows that emotional mastery means maintaining clarity while others lose theirs. Consider the surface of a lake. When calm, it reflects reality perfectly. When disturbed, it distorts everything it shows. This is the perfect metaphor for the mind in strategy. Your task is to maintain your clarity while disturbing your opponent's reflection. Let me ask you this. Have you ever noticed how the most effective leaders maintain their composure precisely when everyone else is losing theirs? How the greatest negotiators stay calm exactly when others become emotional? This is not coincidence. It's strategic mastery. The supreme strategist understands that emotion is like fire, a useful servant but a terrible master. Your task is not to eliminate emotion, but to prevent it from commanding your actions while learning to recognize when it commands others. Think of it this way. Every emotional reaction is a decision made without thinking. Every burst of anger is a moment of blindness. Every surge of fear is an instant of paralysis. These are not weaknesses when you observe them in others. They're opportunities. But here's where true mastery reveals itself. The art lies not in provoking emotion, but in recognizing emotional triggers that already exist. Like a master musician who doesn't create the notes, but rather plays the instruments already present. The master strategist knows that everyone carries their emotional triggers with them: pride, fear, ambition, insecurity. Your task is not to create these triggers, but to understand how they naturally influence decision-making. Consider how many battles have been lost, not through tactical errors, but through emotional reactions. How many negotiations have failed not because of position, but because of pride? How many opportunities have been missed not due to inability, but due to fear? But remember this crucial principle. Your own emotional mastery must come first. You cannot exploit the emotional turbulence of others if you're not steady yourself. You cannot recognize emotional patterns in others if you're caught in your own emotional storms. Here's where most fail in applying this wisdom. They try to use emotion as a weapon before mastering their own. They attempt to manipulate others' feelings while being controlled by their own. They rush to exploit emotional weakness while harboring the same vulnerabilities. Think about how many great leaders have fallen not because of external enemies, but because of their own uncontrolled emotions. How many empires have crumbled not due to invasion, but because of emotional decisions made in moments of pride or fear. The modern world makes this challenge even greater. Information flows constantly, triggering emotional responses. Social media amplifies emotional reactions. The pace of change creates continuous emotional stress. In this environment, emotional mastery becomes even more crucial. So, I challenge you now. Can you develop the discipline to maintain your calm when others lose theirs? Can you learn to observe emotional patterns without becoming entangled in them? Can you master the art of emotional clarity while others remain caught in emotional chaos? Consider these questions in your strategic thinking. What emotional triggers might be influencing your opponent's decisions? What fears might be limiting their options? What pride might be blinding them to reality? But this approach requires something rare in today's world: the ability to step back from emotional engagement while maintaining emotional awareness, to understand feelings without being controlled by them, to recognize emotional patterns without becoming part of them. Remember, the greatest power lies not in creating emotional responses, but in remaining clear while others become emotional. Not in suppressing emotion, but in transcending its control while understanding its influence on others. Let others be driven by their emotions. Let them react from anger, fear, or pride. Let them make decisions in the heat of the moment. You know better now. You understand that true strategy lies not in emotional reaction, but in emotional clarity. The supreme art of emotional strategy is not about becoming cold or unfeeling. It's about maintaining warmth without losing clarity. It's about understanding emotion without being ruled by it. It's about recognizing the emotional currents that move others while staying anchored in your own calm center. Think of yourself as the eye of the storm. Around you, emotional winds may rage and swirl, but in your center lies perfect clarity. This is your strategic advantage, not an absence of emotion, but a mastery of it that allows you to see clearly while others are blinded by their feelings. But this wisdom carries responsibility. The power to recognize and work with emotional patterns must be used with purpose and ethics. Your goal should not be to harm, but to create situations where clarity can prevail over emotional chaos. The difference between a novice and a master lies not in what they can do, but in what they can see. What I'm about to share with you is the art of strategic observation, how to see what others miss, understand what others overlook, and predict what others never anticipate. Here's what most people don't understand. They look but do not see. They watch but do not observe. They gather information but miss intelligence. In their haste to act, they fail to develop the most powerful weapon in any strategist's arsenal, the ability to truly comprehend what lies before them. Consider the hunter who knows the forest so well that every broken twig tells a story. Every disturbed leaf reveals a direction. Every sound carries meaning. This is how you must learn to observe your domain, not just seeing the obvious, but reading the subtle signs that others miss. Let me ask you this. Have you ever noticed how the most successful investors see patterns in the market long before others? How master negotiators read intentions in the smallest gestures? How great leaders sense shifts in momentum before they become visible to others? This is not intuition, it's trained observation. The master strategist understands that everything communicates, every action reveals intention, every pattern suggests a future, every detail contains a universe of information. Your task is not just to collect these signals, but to weave them into a coherent picture of reality. Think of it this way. Every situation is like a tapestry. Most people see only the front, the obvious pattern, but the true observer sees both front and back, understanding how each thread connects, how each pattern forms, how each knot reveals the method of its making. But here's where true mastery reveals itself. The art lies not in seeing everything, but in knowing what to look for. Like a doctor who knows which symptoms matter, your power comes from understanding which observations carry strategic significance. The supreme strategist knows that observation is not passive. It's an active process of connecting dots, recognizing patterns, and anticipating consequences. Your task is not just to watch, but to understand, not just to see, but to comprehend. Not just to notice, but to know. Consider how many opportunities are missed, not because they don't exist, but because they aren't seen. How many threats materialize, not because they couldn't be detected, but because the signs were ignored. How many advantages are lost, not because they disappeared, but because they weren't recognized in time. But remember this crucial principle: observation without understanding is just data collection. Your goal is not to accumulate information, but to develop insight, not to gather facts, but to grasp meanings, not to collect details, but to comprehend patterns. Here's where most fail in applying this wisdom. They focus on what they expect to see rather than what is actually there. They let preconceptions blind them to new patterns. They rush to judgment before gathering complete intelligence. Think about how many great opportunities have been missed because observers were looking in the wrong direction. How many threats have succeeded because watchers were focused on the obvious while the real danger approached from an unexpected quarter? The modern world makes this challenge even greater. Information floods in from all directions. Signals mix with noise. Patterns hide within chaos. In this environment, the ability to observe effectively becomes even more crucial and even more rare. So I challenge you now. Can you develop the patience to truly observe before acting? Can you train your eye to see what others miss? Can you cultivate the discipline to watch without immediately judging? Consider these questions in your strategic thinking. What patterns are forming that others haven't noticed yet? What subtle shifts are occurring beneath the obvious changes? What connections exist that others haven't recognized? But this approach requires something rare in today's world, the ability to slow down in a speed-obsessed culture, to look deeply in an age of superficial scanning, to understand thoroughly in a time of quick conclusions. Remember, the greatest power lies not in seeing what's obvious, but in recognizing what's significant, not in watching everything, but in knowing what to watch, not in gathering all information, but in understanding which information matters. Let others rush to judgment. Let them act on partial information. Let them miss the subtle signals that foretell major shifts. You know better now. You understand that true strategy begins with true observation. The supreme art of strategic observation is not about seeing more. It's about seeing better. It's about developing the ability to extract meaning from chaos, to recognize patterns in complexity, to anticipate futures from present signals. Think of yourself as a master reader of reality. Every situation is a text waiting to be decoded. Every pattern is a message waiting to be understood. Every detail is a clue pointing toward future possibilities. But this wisdom carries responsibility. The power to see clearly must be paired with the wisdom to act appropriately. Your goal should not be just to observe, but to understand. Not just to understand, but to use that understanding in service of your strategic objectives. In the end, remember this: the most powerful observation comes not from looking harder, but from looking differently. Not from gathering more information, but from understanding the information you already have. Not from seeing everything, but from seeing what matters. The essence of strategic mastery lies not in the sequence of actions, but in the control of initiative. What I'm about to share with you revolutionizes the common understanding of first-mover advantage, how to maintain strategic initiative, even when responding to others. Here's what most people don't understand. They believe that moving first means acting first. They confuse initiative with speed. They mistake reaction for weakness. This limited thinking keeps them trapped in a game where timing is determined by others. Consider the master archer. The arrow may be the last thing to move, but the victory was determined the moment the archer took stance. This is how you must learn to think about initiative, not in terms of chronological sequence, but in terms of strategic position. Let me ask you this. Have you ever noticed how the most skilled martial artists seem to control the fight even when countering? How master chess players can dominate the board while playing black? How great negotiators can lead the discussion even when responding? This is not coincidence. It's strategic initiative. The master strategist understands that true initiative is not about when you move, but about who controls the nature of the engagement. Your task is not to act first, but to ensure that all actions, yours and others, serve your strategic purpose. Think of it this way. Every action creates a framework for response. When you understand this deeply enough, you can create situations where even your opponent's moves become part of your strategy. Their initiative becomes your opportunity. But here's where true mastery reveals itself. The art lies not in forcing your will, but in creating conditions where all paths lead to your advantage. Like a master gardener who doesn't force growth, but creates perfect conditions for it. The supreme strategist knows that initiative is psychological, not chronological. Your task is not to race to action, but to establish control over the context in which all actions occur. When you master this, it doesn't matter who moves first. All moves serve your purpose. Consider how many victories have been won not by the first to act, but by the one who controlled the meaning of those actions. How many battles have been decided not by who struck first, but by who defined the nature of the engagement. But remember this crucial principle. Strategic initiative is not about control through force, but through positioning. Your goal is not to dictate every move, but to shape the environment in which moves are made. Here's where most fail in applying this wisdom. They try to control events directly, rather than shaping the conditions that govern events. They focus on actions rather than context. They think in terms of moves rather than momentum. Think about how many great strategists have succeeded not by initiating actions, but by transforming the meaning of actions initiated by others. How? Many victories have come not from forcing events, but from being so well positioned that any event serves their purpose. The modern world makes this understanding even more crucial. In an age of instant reaction and constant change, the ability to maintain strategic initiative regardless of chronological sequence becomes increasingly valuable. So I challenge you now, can you learn to see initiative as something deeper than mere timing? Can you develop the ability to lead strategically even when following chronologically? Can you master the art of controlling the game even when responding to others' moves? Consider these questions in your strategic thinking. How can you position yourself so that others' actions serve your purpose? How can you create conditions where even reactive moves advance your strategy? How can you maintain control without always acting first? But this approach requires something rare in today's world, the ability to think in terms of patterns rather than events, to understand momentum rather than just movement, to see strategy as the art of shaping context rather than just controlling actions. Remember, the greatest power lies not in moving first, but in controlling the significance of all moves, not in acting fastest, but in ensuring that all actions, yours and others, serve your strategic purpose. Let others rush to be first. Let them pride themselves on quick reaction. Let them exhaust themselves trying to lead through speed alone. You know better now. You understand that true strategic initiative comes not from chronological advantage, but from positional mastery. The supreme art of strategic initiative is not about being first. It's about being fundamental. It's about creating situations where your position is so strong that even others' initiatives become your opportunities, where your strategic framework is so well established that even reactive moves advance your purpose. Think of yourself as the composer rather than just a player. Others may play their notes first, but all notes serve your symphony. This is how you maintain initiative even when moving last, by ensuring that every move, regardless of its source, contributes to your strategic composition. But this wisdom carries responsibility. The power to shape context must be used with purpose and foresight. Your goal should not be to control for control's sake, but to create conditions where positive outcomes become natural rather than forced. The most elegant victory comes not from overwhelming force, but from precise pressure perfectly applied. What I'm about to reveal to you is the subtle art of creating conditions where mistakes become inevitable, not through brute force, but through strategic pressure. Here's what most people don't understand. They think pressure means pushing harder, applying more force, increasing intensity. But true strategic pressure is more like acupuncture. It's about finding the exact points where minimal force creates maximum effect. Consider a diamond cutter. One precise tap at the right point splits the stone perfectly. 1,000 heavy blows in the wrong place only destroy the value. This is how you must learn to apply pressure, not through force, but through precision. Let me ask you this. Have you ever noticed how the greatest strategists don't try to break their opponents, but rather create situations where opponents break themselves? How master negotiators don't push for decisions, but rather make certain choices feel inevitable. This is not chance. It's strategic pressure applied with precision. The master strategist understands that every system, every person, every organization has its pressure points. These aren't always obvious weaknesses. They're often structural necessities that, when pressured, create cascading effects throughout the entire system. Think of it this way. Pressure is not about destruction, it's about transformation. Like a hydraulic press that doesn't break the material but reshapes it, strategic pressure should transform situations to your advantage. But here's where true mastery reveals itself. The art lies not in applying pressure everywhere, but in identifying the precise points where pressure will have the greatest impact. Like a master physician who knows exactly where to press to release tension or create change, the supreme strategist knows that mistakes are not random. They're the natural result of pressure meeting vulnerability. Your task is not to force errors, but to create conditions where errors emerge naturally from your opponent's own actions. Consider how many victories have come not through superior strength, but through the careful application of pressure that made mistakes inevitable. How many competitions have been decided not by who was stronger, but by who could maintain composure under precisely applied pressure? But remember this crucial principle: pressure must be sustainable for you and unbearable for them. If maintaining pressure exhausts your resources faster than it affects your opponent, you've already lost. Here's where most fail in applying this wisdom. They apply pressure indiscriminately rather than precisely. They exhaust themselves trying to maintain pressure everywhere rather than focusing it where it matters most. They mistake intensity for effectiveness. Think about how many great strategies have succeeded not through overwhelming force, but through the careful application of pressure at critical points. How many victories have come not from breaking the opponent, but from making certain actions irresistible while making others impossible? The modern world makes this understanding even more crucial. In an interconnected system, precisely applied pressure can create ripple effects far beyond the point of application. Understanding these connections becomes as important as understanding where to apply pressure. So I challenge you now, can you develop the patience to identify true pressure points rather than attacking obvious weaknesses? Can you cultivate the precision to apply exactly the right amount of force, no more, no less? Can you maintain pressure long enough to make certain outcomes inevitable? Consider these questions in your strategic thinking. Where are the points in your opponent's position that, when pressured, will create the largest effects with the least force? What vulnerabilities exist not because of weakness, but because of structural necessity? But this approach requires something rare in today's world: the ability to think in terms of systems rather than simple cause and effect. To understand pressure not as a tool of destruction, but as an instrument of transformation. To see mistakes not as random events, but as natural outcomes of precisely applied pressure. Remember, the greatest power lies not in how much pressure you can apply, but in how precisely you can apply it. Not in forcing mistakes through strength, but in making mistakes inevitable through positioning. Let others exhaust themselves trying to break through walls. Let them wear themselves out applying pressure everywhere. Let them mistake force for effectiveness. You know better now. You understand that true strategic pressure comes not from strength alone, but from precision. The supreme art of strategic pressure is not about being stronger. It's about being smarter in how you apply force. It's about understanding that the right pressure, applied at the right point at the right time, can accomplish what brute force never could. Think of yourself as a master sculptor. You're not trying to break the stone. You're releasing the form that's already there. This is how you should approach strategic pressure, not as a tool of destruction, but as an instrument of transformation. But this wisdom carries responsibility. The power to apply precise pressure must be used with purpose and understanding. Your goal should not be to destroy, but to transform, not to break, but to reshape, not to force, but to make certain outcomes feel natural and inevitable. In the end, remember this: the most effective pressure often feels like opportunity to those experiencing it. The most powerful force often appears as the path of least resistance. The most decisive mistakes often feel like rational choices to those making them. This is the essence of strategic pressure: not to push, but to position; not to force, but to facilitate; not to break, but to guide toward inevitable conclusions. True strategic mastery lies not just in knowing how to advance, but in understanding how to retreat. What I'm about to share with you is perhaps the most overlooked aspect of strategy, the art of maintaining freedom of movement through masterful exit planning. Here's what most people don't understand. They mistake commitment for strategy. They confuse determination with wisdom. They sacrifice flexibility for the appearance of resolve. This rigid thinking turns potential victories into inevitable defeats. Consider the wise general who knows that the same door that lets you in must also let you out. This is not pessimism. It's strategic prudence. Every position you take, every commitment you make, every advance you plot must include the possibility of strategic withdrawal. Let me ask you this. Have you ever noticed how the most successful entrepreneurs always maintain multiple options? How skilled investors never commit so deeply that they can't adjust their position? How master negotiators always leave room for graceful exit? This is not coincidence. It's strategic wisdom. The master strategist understands that true power lies not in how firmly you can hold a position, but in how freely you can move between positions. Your task is not just to secure advantages, but to maintain the freedom to adapt when those advantages shift. Think of it this way. Every position is temporary. Every advantage is transient. Every strategy has its season. Your power comes not from holding on at all costs, but from knowing when and how to let go. But here's where true mastery reveals itself. The art lies not in planning for failure, but in ensuring that no single failure can be fatal. Like a master chess player who never makes a move without considering multiple paths forward and back. The supreme strategist knows that exit strategies are not about escape, they're about options. Your task is not to plan for retreat, but to maintain such freedom of movement that you never become trapped by your own success. Consider how many great fortunes have been lost not through poor advance, but through poor withdrawal. How many victories have turned to defeats not because the initial strategy was wrong, but because there was no plan for what to do when circumstances changed. But remember this crucial principle. The best exit strategy is one you never need to use. Its power lies not in its execution, but in the freedom it provides, the ability to act boldly, precisely, because you know you can adjust if needed. Here's where most fail in applying this wisdom. They wait until they need an exit before planning one. They treat withdrawal as failure rather than tactical repositioning. They let pride keep them committed to failing positions long after strategic wisdom would have them move. Think about how many businesses have failed, not because their initial strategy was wrong, but because they couldn't adapt when the market changed. How many investments have been lost, not through poor entry, but through poor exit? How many relationships have soured not through lack of commitment, but through lack of flexibility? The modern world makes this understanding even more crucial. Change happens faster. Advantages erode more quickly. Positions that seem secure can become vulnerable overnight. In this environment, strategic flexibility becomes more valuable than ever. So I challenge you now. Can you learn to see exit strategies not as admissions of defeat, but as tools of strategic flexibility? Can you develop the wisdom to prepare withdrawal routes even as you advance? Can you maintain the courage to use them when needed? Consider these questions in your strategic thinking. What are your options if current advantages shift? How can you maintain freedom of movement even as you commit resources? What positions might become traps if circumstances change? But this approach requires something rare in today's world, the ability to think simultaneously about advance and withdrawal, commitment and flexibility, determination, and adaptation. To understand that true strategy lies not in blind persistence, but in maintained maneuverability. Remember, the greatest power lies not in how firmly you can hold a position, but in how freely you can move between positions, not in how deeply you can commit, but in how wisely you can maintain options. Let others pride themselves on their unwavering commitment. Let them boast about burning bridges behind them. Let them mistake rigid determination for strategic wisdom. You know better. Now, you understand that true strategy lies not in eliminating options, but in maintaining them. The supreme art of strategic withdrawal is not about retreat. It's about freedom. It's about maintaining such control over your position that you'd never become its prisoner. Where others see retreat as failure, you recognize it as tactical repositioning. Think of yourself as a master of strategic mobility. Every position you take should have multiple exits. Every commitment you make should preserve freedom of movement. Every advance you plot should include paths of tactical withdrawal. But this wisdom carries responsibility. The power to withdraw must be paired with the wisdom to know when to hold firm. Your goal should not be to avoid commitment, but to ensure that your commitments don't become traps. Not to plan for failure, but to ensure that no failure becomes final. In the end, remember this: the most powerful position is not the one that's most secure, but the one that offers the most options. The strongest strategy is not the one that commits you most deeply, but the one that preserves your freedom of movement most completely. The greatest victory is not the one that traps you at the top, but the one that lets you continue playing the game on your own terms. The most powerful force in strategy is not action, but perfectly timed action. What I'm about to share with you is the supreme art of strategic patience, how to master the power of stillness and unleash action only at the precise moment of maximum effect. Here's what most people don't understand. They confuse activity with achievement. They mistake motion for progress. They let the pressure of time push them into premature action. This is why they exhaust themselves while accomplishing little. Consider the snow leopard. It can remain motionless for hours, conserving energy, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. This is not inaction. It's supreme action in potential form. This is how you must learn to approach strategy. Let me ask you this. Have you ever noticed how the most successful investors often make fewer moves than amateur traders? How master martial artists often move less than their opponents but achieve more? How great commanders can win battles by choosing not to engage? This is not coincidence. It's strategic mastery. The master strategist understands that every premature action is a wasted action. Your task is not to be constantly moving, but to move with such perfect timing that minimum effort produces maximum effect. Think of it this way. Strategy is not about being busy. It's about being effective. Like an archer who draws the bow only when the target is within perfect range, your power comes not from constant action, but from perfectly timed action. But here's where true mastery reveals itself. The art lies not in remaining passive, but in maintaining active stillness. Like a coiled spring, you should be gathering energy even when appearing motionless. The supreme strategist knows that timing is everything. Your task is not just to act, but to act at the precise moment when conditions align for maximum impact. This requires the wisdom to wait and the decisiveness to strike when the moment comes. Consider how many opportunities have been missed, not through lack of ability, but through lack of patience. How many resources have been wasted, not through poor strategy, but through poor timing? How many victories have been transformed into defeats simply because action came too soon? But remember this crucial principle. Strategic patience is not about waiting for perfect conditions. It's about waiting for the right conditions. The difference is everything. One leads to paralysis, the other to power. Here's where most fail in applying this wisdom. They mistake hesitation for patience. They confuse inaction with strategy. They wait without purpose, rather than waiting with precision. Think about how many battles have been won not by the side with superior strength, but by the side with superior timing. How many opportunities have been seized not by those who acted first, but by those who acted at the right moment? The modern world makes this challenge even greater. Everything pushes for immediate action, instant response, constant movement. In this environment, strategic patience becomes not just valuable, but vital. So I challenge you now. Can you develop the discipline to remain still when others rush to action? Can you cultivate the wisdom to recognize the difference between hesitation and strategic waiting? Can you build the courage to resist pressure for premature movement? Consider these questions in your strategic thinking. What opportunities might reveal themselves if you wait rather than rush? What advantages might emerge through patience rather than immediate action? What power might you gain by choosing the perfect moment rather than the present moment? But this approach requires something rare in today's world, the ability to resist the constant pressure for action. To understand that strategic waiting is not passive, but one of the most active forms of strategy. Remember, the greatest power lies not in constant movement, but in perfectly timed movement. Not in being first to act, but in acting when action will have the greatest effect. Let others exhaust themselves with constant activity. Let them mistake motion for progress. Let them confuse busyness with effectiveness. You know better now. You understand that true strategy lies not in constant action, but in perfectly timed action. The supreme art of strategic timing is not about speed, it's about precision. It's about understanding that power comes not from how often you move, but from how perfectly timed your movements are. Think of yourself as a master of timing. Every moment of stillness is a moment of preparation. Every period of waiting is a period of positioning. Every instance of patience is an investment in future power. But this wisdom carries responsibility. The power to wait must be paired with the wisdom to recognize the right moment and the courage to seize it when it comes. Your goal should not be inaction, but perfect action at the perfect time. In the end, remember this. The most powerful move is often the one you don't make until the time is exactly right. The strongest strategy is often the one that waits for conditions to align, rather than forcing them to align. The greatest victory often comes not to those who strike first, or most often, but to those who strike at precisely the right moment. Consider the difference between a stream and a dam. The stream flows constantly but with limited power. The dam waits, gathering its strength, then releases its power with overwhelming force. This is how you must learn to use strategic timing, not through constant action, but through perfectly timed release of accumulated power. Your stillness should be like the surface of a lake before a storm, calm above, but gathering energy. Below, your waiting should be like the moment before an avalanche, everything prepared, requiring only the right moment to unleash tremendous force. The most sophisticated trap is the one that looks like an opportunity. What I'm about to reveal to you is perhaps the most subtle art of strategic warfare, how to make your opponent's confidence become their greatest vulnerability. Here's what most people don't understand. They think deception means hiding strength. But true strategic deception often means hiding strategy itself behind apparent artlessness. The greatest trick isn't making others see weakness, it's making them trust their own perceived advantages. Consider the expert angler who knows that the most effective lure is the one that seems most natural to the fish. This is not about deception for its own sake. It's about understanding how confidence can blind perception. Let me ask you this. Have you ever noticed how the most devastating competitive moves often come when one side feels most secure? How the greatest strategic reversals often happen when victory seems most certain? This is not coincidence. It's the power of induced confidence. The master strategist understands that overconfidence is not just a weakness. It's a lever that can be used to move mountains. Your task is not to break your opponent's confidence, but to guide it toward self-defeating conclusions. Think of it this way. Every strength contains the seeds of vulnerability. The more confident someone is in their advantage, the less likely they are to question it. The more certain they are of their position, the less carefully they examine it. But here's where true mastery reveals itself. The art lies not in creating false confidence, but in allowing natural confidence to grow beyond wisdom, like a gardener who doesn't plant weeds but knows which ones to let flourish. The supreme strategist knows that people defeat themselves most completely when they're convinced they're winning. Your task is not to convince them they're strong. It's to let them convince themselves they're invincible. Consider how many great victories in history came not through superior strength, but through the careful cultivation of enemy overconfidence. How many competitions were decided not by the winner's brilliance, but by the loser's certainty of their own advantage. But remember this crucial principle. The confidence you allow to grow in others must appear to come from their own judgment. The moment they suspect external influence, the spell is broken. Here's where most fail in applying this wisdom. They try too hard to create false impressions rather than letting natural tendencies develop. They force situations rather than cultivating them. They rush the process when patience would serve better. Think about how many successful strategies have relied not on deception about strength, but on allowing others to deceive themselves about their own position. How many victories have come, not from hiding capability, but from letting others overestimate theirs. The modern world makes this understanding even more crucial. In an age of transparency, obvious deception becomes increasingly difficult. But the human tendency toward overconfidence remains as exploitable as ever. So I challenge you now. Can you learn to see confidence not just as a state of mind, but as a strategic tool? Can you develop the patience to let overconfidence grow naturally rather than trying to manufacture it? Can you master the art of allowing others to convince themselves of their superiority? Consider these questions in your strategic thinking. What natural tendencies toward overconfidence exist in your opponent's position? What assumptions do they hold most deeply? What advantages do they trust most completely? But this approach requires something rare in today's world, the ability to think in terms of psychological momentum rather than direct cause and effect, to understand confidence not as a fixed state, but as a growing force that can be guided. Remember, the greatest power lies not in making others doubt themselves, but in letting them become too certain. Not in creating weakness, but in allowing strength to become its own weakness. Let others work to undermine confidence. Let them focus on creating doubt. Let them try to break certainty directly. You know better now. You understand that true strategy lies not in attacking confidence, but in cultivating it until it becomes vulnerability. The supreme art of strategic confidence manipulation is not about making others weak. It's about letting them become too strong in their own minds. It's about understanding that the most dangerous opponent is often the one who's absolutely certain of their position. Think of yourself as a master gardener of confidence. You don't plant the seeds of overconfidence, you simply create conditions where they naturally grow. You don't force the growth, you simply ensure that nothing interrupts the natural progression from confidence to overconfidence to vulnerability. But this wisdom carries responsibility. The power to guide others' confidence must be used with purpose and understanding. Your goal should not be to destroy, but to create situations where better understanding can emerge from the lessons of overconfidence. In the end, remember this. The most effective trap is not the one that looks like a trap. It's the one that looks like an opportunity. The most powerful deception is not the one that creates false weakness. It's the one that allows natural strength to become its own undoing. The ultimate victory lies not in winning the battle, but in mastering its aftermath. What I'm about to share with you is the highest level of strategic thinking, how to win not just the immediate conflict, but the peace that follows. Here's what most people don't understand. They focus solely on immediate victory. They mistake winning battles for winning wars. They celebrate triumph without securing its fruits. This short-sightedness turns today's victory into tomorrow's defeat. Consider the seasons. Spring's victory over winter means nothing if summer's abundance isn't prepared for. This is how you must think about strategy, not just about winning the moment, but about securing the future. Let me ask you this. Have you ever noticed how some victories lead to greater conflicts while others establish lasting peace? How some successes breed resentment while others generate respect? How some triumphs create enemies while others build allies? This is not chance, it's strategic mastery. The master strategist understands that every victory creates a new strategic landscape. Your task is not just to win, but to win in a way that shapes this landscape to your long-term advantage. Think of it this way: every battle is like a stone thrown into a pond. The immediate splash is just the beginning. It's the ripples that shape the water's final state. Your strategy must account not just for the splash, but for all the ripples that follow. But here's where true mastery reveals itself. The art lies not in just winning, but in winning in a way that makes future conflicts unnecessary. Like a master gardener who doesn't just grow this year's crop, but enriches the soil for years to come. The supreme strategist knows that the most important phase of any conflict is what happens after it ends. Your task is not just to defeat your opponent, but to create conditions where they have no desire to oppose you again. Consider how many great empires fell, not because they couldn't win battles, but because they couldn't maintain peace. How many victories turned hollow because their aftermath was mismanaged? How many successes bred the seeds of their own destruction? But remember this crucial principle. The aftermath of victory is where most victories are truly won or lost. How you handle success often matters more than how you achieved it. Here's where most fail in applying this wisdom. They exhaust their resources, winning the battle, and have nothing left to secure the peace. They focus so intently on defeating their opponent that they forget about the world that's watching. They mistake submission for reconciliation. Think about how many victories have been undone not through defeat, but through poor management of success. How many triumphs have turned bitter because their winners didn't understand that winning the battle was just the beginning. The modern world makes this understanding even more crucial. Information flows instantly. Alliances shift rapidly. Today's victory can become tomorrow's liability faster than ever before. In this environment, managing the aftermath of success becomes even more important than achieving it. So, I challenge you now. Can you learn to see beyond immediate victory to its long-term implications? Can you develop the wisdom to win in ways that create lasting advantage rather than temporary triumph? Can you master the art of turning today's success into tomorrow's security? Consider these questions in your strategic thinking. How will your victory affect the broader landscape? What new challenges might emerge from your success? How can you win in a way that strengthens your position rather than just defeating your opponent? But this approach requires something rare in today's world: the ability to think beyond immediate results to long-term consequences, to understand victory not as an end point, but as a transition phase, to see success not as a conclusion, but as a foundation. Remember, the greatest power lies not in winning battles, but in making battles unnecessary. Not in defeating enemies, but in transforming them into allies. Not in achieving victory, but in creating conditions where victory creates lasting peace. Let others celebrate immediate triumph. Let them focus solely on winning battles. Let them mistake temporary success for lasting victory. You know better now. You understand that true strategy lies not just in winning, but in winning wisely. The supreme art of strategic victory is not about defeating your opponent. It's about creating a better situation for all parties. It's about understanding that the most powerful victory is the one that makes future conflicts unnecessary. Think of yourself as an architect of the future, not just a warrior of the present. Every victory should be a building block for a more stable tomorrow. Every success should lay the foundation for lasting peace. But this wisdom carries the greatest responsibility of all: the power to shape the aftermath of victory must be used with profound understanding and foresight. Your goal should not be to win at all costs, but to win in ways that create sustainable success. In the end, remember this: the most important battle is not the one you're fighting now, it's the one you're preventing through wise victory. The greatest strategy is not the one that brings you to triumph, but the one that transforms triumph into lasting peace. Before we conclude this journey through strategic wisdom, understand this final truth. You are not just learning how to win battles. You are learning how to create positive change through strategic thinking. This is the ultimate purpose of all strategy, not just to prevail, but to improve. Not just to win, but to win in ways that make the world better rather than worse. The measure of your strategic mastery will not be found in how many battles you win, but in how many battles you make unnecessary. Not in how completely you defeat others, but in how effectively you transform competition into cooperation. Not in the power you display, but in the wisdom with which you use it. This is your path now. Not just to victory, but to strategic mastery. Not just to success, but to lasting achievement. Not just to power, but to wisdom in its use. The journey doesn't end with victory. It begins there. Now go forth and create not just victories, but better tomorrows through your strategic wisdom.